Imagine this. It's 1982. You push through a set of glass doors, and the world outside vanishes. You're hit by a wall of sound, a digital symphony of lasers, explosions, and the jingle of falling tokens. This is the arcade. In 1982, this was the undisputed center of the gaming universe. It wasn't just a place to play games, it was a neon-lit cathedral, and the kids crowded around the glowing screens were its most fervent worshippers. The technology here was light years ahead of anything you could dream of at home. This was the bleeding edge. This was where you saw true three-dimensional flight for the first time in Zaxxon. It's where you swung from vines like a pulp hero in Jungle Hunt. It's where you mastered the bizarre, brilliant physics of flapping a battle ostrich in Joust. The arcade wasn't just a business, it was a cultural phenomenon, earning more than Hollywood. And in 1982, it was at its absolute, unchallenged peak. This is the story of that golden age, right before the cataclysmic fall.
1982 wasn't just a golden age, it was a financial singularity. The numbers are staggering. The total combined revenue for the North American arcade and home video game markets reached an estimated $11.8 billion that year. The arcade was the engine. Arcade game revenue alone, measured in millions of coins, was estimated at $8 billion. To put that in perspective, that single market surpassed the annual gross revenue of both pop music and Hollywood films combined. In 1982, the average top-earning arcade cabinet was pulling in over $250 per week. So let's hop onto the arcade wagon and check what games were released that year. First, we have Zaxxon. Released by Sega in 1982, wasn't just another arcade shooter, it was a technical leap that stunned the industry. Its creation was driven by a single purpose, to give players a visceral sense of space that had never been achieved before. The developer's masterstroke was the use of isometric projection, a visual trick that used an inclined perspective to create a groundbreaking pseudo-3D environment. This technique, which the game was named after, broke free from the flat two-dimensional walls of games like Galaga, suddenly giving players the feeling of piloting a ship inside a massive volumetric space fortress. This 3D illusion introduced the crucial element of altitude control. You weren't just moving left and right, you were flying over walls and under electric barriers. To help players conquer this challenge, the developers added a simple but brilliant innovation, the ship's shadow. This shadow was the key to gameplay, allowing you to accurately judge your height and depth relative to the ground. Zaxxon became an immediate commercial smash, cementing its legacy by becoming the first arcade game ever advertised on television, announcing to the world that video games were now major mainstream entertainment. Next up, Miss Pac-Man. If Pac-Man was the undisputed king of 1980, its successor, Miss Pac-Man, was the runaway queen of 1982. But the story of its creation is one of corporate intrigue and garage-level ingenuity. It wasn't designed by Namco. It was born from a group of outside American developers called GCC, or General Computer Corporation. These MIT-affiliated students initially created an unauthorized modification kit called Crazy Auto to give aging Pac-Man cabinets a jolt of new life. Midway, the North American distributor, saw the massive potential in Crazy Auto and quickly bought the rights, transforming it into the official sequel. This unconventional origin is why the game felt instantly superior. It was designed by outsiders focused on fixing the original's flaw. They introduced 4 rotating maze layouts and added semi-random movement to the ghosts, making strategies based on pure memorization impossible. Miss Pac-Man became a greater commercial success than its predecessor, proving that even a worldwide phenomenon could be improved upon. Then you had Dig Dug. In a year saturated with space shooters and maze games, Namco's Dig Dug stood out as a bizarre masterpiece of strategic design. The game was largely the work of designer Takanori Miyakawa, who was determined to create an action title where the player could actively shape the environment. Instead of passively moving through a pre-designed maze, the player, controlling Dig Dug, had to tunnel through dirt, creating their own pathways to engage the enemy. The unique core mechanic, inflating the enemies with an air pump until they explode, was inspired by a simple children's toy, a rubber squeeze bulb. This provided a strangely satisfying and tense gameplay. Miyakawa also introduced the element of suspense by having the game's music only play when the character was moving. This design choice forced the player to take risks to advance the soundtrack, while stopping required a focused silence to listen for the precise creeping location of the underground monsters. Dig Dug was a true original, proving that innovation could still be found deep below the surface. Following the smash success of Donkey Kong, Nintendo needed a sequel, and it came from the same creative team, Shigeru Miyamoto and Gunpei Yokoi. Their objective was bold, to flip the narrative and expand the Donkey Kong universe. In a dramatic twist, they cast the player's beloved hero, Mario, as the villain, portraying him as a cruel zookeeper who has imprisoned the original Donkey Kong. The player, controlling the little ape Donkey Kong Jr., embarks on a rescue mission. This narrative change fueled new gameplay mechanics. The core challenge became climbing vines and chains, but with a strategic twist. The speed of movement was dictated by the number of chains the player grasped. Grabbing 2 chains allowed for faster ascent, adding a layer of physics and strategy that demanded precision. Donkey Kong Jr. proved Miyamoto's creative versatility, demonstrating that a successful game franchise could subvert expectations and continue to evolve its core characters. Next up, Jungle Hunt. Created by Taito, was designed to break the mold of single-screen gameplay by offering an epic 4-part adventure. Its journey began under a different name, Jungle King, which was an instant hit, but Taito was swiftly forced to revise the game due to copyright concerns over its Tarzan-like character and yell. The quickly revamped Jungle Hunt retained the brilliant multi-stage design. The designers wanted to constantly challenge the player with new action scenarios, from swinging across vines in the first stage to stabbing crocodiles while swimming, and then leaping over boulders. This variety made the game feel expansive and cinematic. Furthermore, Jungle Hunt was one of the early arcade games to feature parallax scrolling, a technical trick where background layers moved slower than foreground elements, which created a stunning and immersive illusion of depth in the dense jungle setting. Pitfall was the brainchild of David Crane, one of the founding members of Activision, the first successful third-party developer for the Atari 2600. Crane's motivation was to prove that complex, large-scale adventure games were possible on the Atari's notoriously limited hardware, which offered only 4 kilobytes of memory. His game wasn't just about score, it was about exploration and timing. He achieved this massive scope by utilizing a special programming technique. The game only stored the differences between jungle screens, giving the player access to 255 seamlessly connected screens, a huge world for the time. Players controlled Pitfall Harry, navigating scorpions, rolling logs, and, most memorably, swinging across alligator-infested pits using vines. Pitfall became a cultural phenomenon, selling millions and proving that innovation could come from outside the official Atari studios, single-handedly establishing the side-scrolling platformer as a viable genre. But what about the PC industry? While the home console market was imploding, the home computer scene was flourishing with ambitious new genres. One of the masters was Richard Garriott, the young Texas-based developer known as Lord British. Garriott had published the Ultima game in 1981, and with Ultima 2 in 1982 for the Apple II and Atari 8-bit, he was determined to expand the fantasy role-playing genre into an epic saga. The motivation was to give players unparalleled scope. Ultima 2 featured a massive world map that players could explore, but the game went a step further, allowing travel to different planets and even through time to explore various eras, from the age of dinosaurs to the far future. This concept of nonlinear, multi-world exploration defined the early computer role-playing game, or CRPG. Garriott proved that the home computer was the place for deep, sprawling adventures that offered dozens of hours of complex gameplay, setting the standard for the entire fantasy genre. In a year of arcade fantasy, the most enduring software title for the new IBM PC was Microsoft Flight Simulator. It wasn't designed as a game at all. It was developed by Bruce Artwick's Sublogic Corporation and licensed to Microsoft. The original purpose, dating back to 1979, was to create a program that utilized and demonstrated the graphical capabilities of the newest home computers, particularly the emerging 16-bit architecture of the IBM PC. The designer's motivation was realism. It was a tour de force of programming that used wireframe graphics and complex calculations to accurately model flight dynamics, ground features, and even weather patterns. Released in November 1982, Flight Simulator showed a new segment of the market, business users and professionals, that the personal computer could offer more than spreadsheets. It created a new genre, the realistic software simulation, which continues to define PC gaming to this day.
Unlike games that reset upon completion, Wizardry 2 was designed as a continuation, demanding that players import their high-level characters from the first game to face the new challenges. This six-level, first-person, grid-based dungeon crawl was designed for hardened veterans, immediately raising the difficulty and continuing the narrative of the city of Lilgomen. This bold requirement created a dedicated, loyal audience and defined the Wizardry franchise as a deep, ongoing series, proving that players would invest time and money into building permanent digital adventurers. In 1982, the Japanese home computer market was beginning to cultivate its own distinct genres. The Dragon Princess, or Doragon Hime, was a key early title for the PC 8001 computer, though documentation on its specific developer is scarce due to the era's fragmented amateur scene. However, its historical importance lies in its role as a precursor to the Japanese role-playing game genre. The motivation behind early Japanese RPGs was often to adapt the complex, narrative-driven mechanics found in Western games like Ultima and Wizardry, while overlaying them with a distinctly Japanese visual style and focus on narrative. The Dragon Princess provided an early example of this direction, featuring top-down exploration and turn-based combat. Its quiet success, alongside other pioneering titles on platforms like the PC-88 and PC-98, demonstrated that the Japanese market was eager for large-scale, fantasy adventure software, planting the crucial seeds for the JRPG explosion that would follow later in the decade. Finally, the story of E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial is not one of design triumph, but of corporate hubris and pressure. It was created by Howard Scott Warshaw of Atari, a brilliant programmer known for hits like Yar's Revenge. However, the pressure to cash in on the blockbuster movie was immense. Following a massive licensing deal, Atari gave Warshaw an impossible deadline to meet the 1982 Christmas sales window. He had only 5.5 weeks to design and program the entire game. Warshaw's core idea was for E.T. to collect pieces of a communicator to phone home, but the rushed development forced him to implement mechanics that were buggy and frustrating, most notably the constant falling into deep pits, which broke the flow of the game and infuriated players. The failure was not a coding mistake, but a corporate one. Atari overproduced approximately 5 million cartridges, and the resulting flood of unsold product became the most potent symbol of the industry's rot, directly contributing to the collapse of 1983. In the crowded and chaotic home market of 1982, every manufacturer wanted a piece of the action, often with disastrous results. One prime example was the Arcadia 2001, created by Emerson Radio Corporation. Emerson's motivation was simple: to undercut the dominant Atari 2600 and the rising ColecoVision by offering a machine at a lower price point. They aimed to appeal to budget-conscious parents and retailers skeptical of the high prices demanded by the market leaders. The problem was its technology. Launched in 1982, the Arcadia 2001 was already technologically obsolete upon release. It utilized a processor that was slower than its competitors, resulting in less detailed graphics and limited color palettes. The console quickly earned a reputation for having subpar ports of popular arcade games. Furthermore, Coleco successfully sued Emerson over the console's joystick design, which was too similar to the ColecoVision's. The Arcadia 2001 was a commercial failure and a perfect illustration of the era's frantic market saturation. It was a console driven by hope and greed, ultimately fading into obscurity as a casualty of the coming crash. Next up, the ColecoVision, released by Coleco in 1982, was designed to be a decisive attack on Atari's dominance. Coleco's motivation was clear and aggressive: to create a home machine that delivered the arcade-perfect experience. Its technology was specifically engineered to be more powerful than the aging Atari 2600 and Mattel's Intellivision. This promise was fulfilled right out of the box, as the console was famously bundled with a near-flawless home version of Nintendo's Donkey Kong. The ColecoVision featured superior graphics and a revolutionary expansion module interface that allowed the console to accept add-ons, turning it into a home computer, or even allowing it to play Atari 2600 cartridges via the expansion module number 1. This feature was designed to make the console future-proof and capture the massive existing library of Atari owners. The console was a huge hit, selling over 500,000 units in its first 5 months and forcing Atari to respond desperately, escalating the hardware war that helped define 1982. And of course, the Atari 5200 was the official successor to the legendary 2600, released by Atari in 1982. Its creation was driven by the necessity to reassert technical dominance in the face of rising competition like the ColecoVision. Atari adapted the powerful architecture of its own Atari 400 and 800 home computers, giving the 5200 superior graphical and sound capabilities compared to any previous dedicated console. However, the launch was hampered by critical missteps. Chief among them were the non-centering analog joysticks, which lacked the feel and precision required for arcade-style games and frustrated players. Furthermore, Atari decided the console would not be backward compatible with the massive library of 2600 games, forcing early adopters to start their collections from scratch. The 5200 was designed to be a technological champion, but the poor controller design and a lack of key backward compatibility diluted its market impact, signaling the first true signs of weakness in the Atari empire.
But what about the Timex Sinclair 1000? TS-1000 was the product of a collaboration between British electronics designer Sir Clive Sinclair and Timex Corporation, who manufactured and distributed it in the US in 1982. The motivation behind the TS-1000, known as the Sinclair ZX81 in the UK, was to achieve the ultimate goal of mass-market affordability. It debuted at an astonishing price of only $99.95, making it the first personal computer to sell for under $100. Sinclair's strategy was to design a computer for the absolute masses, simplifying the components to the bare minimum. This budget approach resulted in its notoriously flimsy membrane keyboard and reliance on black and white graphics. Crucially, its simplicity meant it came with only 2 kilobytes of memory, forcing users to buy an expensive, wobbly 16K RAM pack just to run meaningful programs. The TS-1000 was never a gaming powerhouse, but its low price introduced tens of thousands of Americans to personal computing and programming, demonstrating that the future of interactive entertainment lay in affordable, general-purpose computers, not just dedicated consoles. In the United Kingdom, 1982 was defined by a different kind of hardware revolution, the affordable home computer. The ZX Spectrum, created by Sir Clive Sinclair's company, Sinclair Research, was a masterpiece of budget engineering. Sinclair's core motivation was to democratize computing, putting a truly capable color computer into millions of homes at a price point that undercut every competitor. Its 1982 release price, starting around £125, made it an instant sensation across the UK. The Spectrum featured color graphics and sound, a huge step up from Sinclair's previous monochrome machines. While it was beloved for its capability, it was notorious for its design compromises, namely the dead-flesh rubber keyboard and its reliance on external cassette players to load software. Despite these quirks, its accessibility and its powerful internal Z81 processor launched a generation of British bedroom programmers, making the Spectrum the cornerstone of the UK's burgeoning gaming industry and a massive cultural icon. Also vying for market share in the booming UK computer scene was the Dragon 32, manufactured by the Welsh company Dragon Data. The motivation behind the Dragon 32 was to provide a more robust and powerful alternative to the inexpensive Sinclair and Commodore machines, specifically positioning itself as a serious, well-built home computer for power users. It was based on the design of the Tandy TRS-80 color computer, but was engineered to be an all-purpose machine, capable of both education and advanced gaming. The Dragon 32 launched with a full typewriter-style keyboard, which was far superior to its competitors' membrane keys, appealing directly to users who intended to do a lot of serious programming. Furthermore, its name referred to its generous 32 kilobytes of RAM, twice that of many popular computers at the time. While the Dragon 32 gained a devoted following, it ultimately couldn't match the massive marketing and distribution success of the ZX Spectrum and the Commodore 64, making it a powerful but ultimately secondary contender in the chaotic computer wars of 1982.
And last but not least, Commodore 64. If the arcades were the present of 1982, the Commodore 64 was the future. Released in August 1982 by Commodore International, this machine was not just a home computer. It became the single best-selling computer model of all time, shaping an entire generation of programmers and gamers. Its creation was the result of a deliberate, aggressive corporate strategy. Commodore aimed to leverage its ability to manufacture key computer components, particularly its own memory chips, to aggressively undercut the price of competitors like Apple and Atari. The C64 was designed to be powerful, yet incredibly affordable. The computer was initially priced at $595, a significantly lower price point than most rivals, but its internal architecture was anything but cheap. The name refers to its defining feature, 64 kilobytes of RAM, a truly massive amount of memory for a home machine at the time. This abundance of memory allowed developers to create games with a depth and sophistication impossible on consoles. Crucially, the C64 featured 2 highly specialized chips that gave it a massive advantage in the gaming arena. The first was the VIC-2 chip, which handled the graphics. It provided multicolor sprites, hardware scrolling, and superior graphics resolution that rivaled contemporary arcade machines, instantly making it a formidable gaming machine. The second, and perhaps most legendary component, was the SID, Sound Interface Device chip. Created by engineer Robert Yanis,
The SID chip was essentially a synthesizer on a chip, capable of producing complex three-voice music, digitized sounds, and rich audio textures. The SID chip gave the C64 a unique, iconic voice and allowed game music to evolve from simple jingles into sophisticated electronic compositions, setting the soundtrack for the 1980s. The Commodore 64 blurred the lines between gaming and computing entirely. While parents were sold on its potential for education and basic word processing, kids recognized it as the ultimate gaming platform. Its affordability and technical muscle made it the definitive machine for computer gaming throughout the decade, providing a massive, robust platform that ultimately helped the home computer market survive the console crash of 1983. It wasn't just a successful product, it was a cultural phenomenon that defined the capabilities of the personal computer era.
So, what does 1982 truly represent? It was the year of ultimate duality. We saw the unparalleled genius of the SID chip and the true birth of 3D gaming, setting the technical foundation for decades to come. New pioneers like Electronic Arts entered the fray, promising a better future. But this era was also marked by hubris and greed. The market was a balloon, inflated past its bursting point by too many consoles and too many cheap, unsold games. The sheer volume of failure, symbolized by millions of buried cartridges, was an unsustainable burden. The high-water mark had been reached. The industry had built the future, but in its rush to profit from the present, it had sealed its own fate. The lights were about to go out.